Now, there's no doubt about it. Today's GDP numbers prove we are in a recession, a fact that didn't come as a surprise to most economists. But while they were warning about it, the Biden administration spent months doing everything in their power to deny this was about to happen. Watch.
In my view, the probability of a recession within the next year is not particularly elevated.
No one is predicting a recession now.
I don't think a recession is at all inevitable.
The recession not inevitable.
There's nothing inevitable about a recession.
And right now, we don't see a recession.
These numbers that we're posting are very much inconsistent with a recessionary call.
But I don't think we're going to, God willing, I don't think we're going to see a recession.
And today, the president appears to be gaslighting America, now saying in a statement that it's, quote, no surprise the economy is slowing down. Jackie, I want to get your top line thoughts on this, and also through the lens of what do Americans care about a common or technical definition of a recession if they feel it, no matter what it's called?
Well, and that's the point, right? We all knew we were in a recession before we got this number today. And the White House can spin it, they can put it in a blender, they can shred up the number if they want. But the reality is inflation, which is not transitory, all those people in the montage said it was, not transitory, has put us in this position right now. And Americans across the country are struggling with higher gas prices, higher food prices, higher cost of goods and services across the board. They are struggling to make ends meet and put food on the table. Literally, that's the point that we're getting to. So every economist that you talk to, every market watcher said we were already in a recession. And that's how people feel. The polls reflect it as well. And that's the sentiment throughout the country. So he can get on TV right now and say that he's not surprised that we're in some sort of slowdown and that's all this is and it's nothing to be worried about. But the reality is you cannot change the definition of where we are right now. And as you said, people feel it. They feel it in their families. And you see it in the stock market. Smart money has been predicting this for some time, not just in the stock market, but the bond market as well. And actually, I think what I'm worried about is that we're in for a period of stagflation. Stagflation, simply put, is slow growth with high inflation. A lot of this inflation is embedded very deeply in the economy. It's not going to go away overnight. The only reason the stock market is a little bit higher today is because the market's saying, oh, okay, well, technically now, and by the definition, we're in a recession. So maybe Jerome Powell isn't going to have to, be as aggressive as he's been, or people thought that he would be. And, this will kind of it'll sort of like just bump along, if you will. But that bump along, that ride, that's tough for people.
Yes, it is. And Jerome Powell was the one that said, oh, we're not in a recession because of the strength of the labor market, 3.6 unemployment rate, 2.7 million jobs added in the year. But it doesn't matter, Jason, if all of those things Jackie outlined are what Americans feel. So we have the president's failing economic policies against the gaslighting that we continue to hear from this administration, or the flip-flopping. What does that mean for the midterms?
Well, look, the administration looks like buffoons out there. They can't admit what's really happening. They try to redefine inflation. They try to redefine, and put a spin on this. What Americans understand is that this administration doesn't have a game plan. What you don't hear from them is, all right, here's what we're going to do about it. And if you don't increase the supply, for instance, on energy, and you don't have a plan to actually turn on the spigots and produce American energy, you're not going to solve this problem. It's going to continue to drag on. So going into the midterms, which are coming up, early voting starts pretty soon. I'd hate to be a Democrat. None of them want to campaign with Joe Biden. I think he's endorsed less than 5 people going into the midterms because he's radioactive. Nobody wants to touch him. He doesn't have a plan. And when he goes out and speaks, the world shudders because he's just not cognitive in his ability to actually articulate sentences that make sense and to solve the problem. That's the problem.
And Kennedy, just today after the GDP report came out, let's take a look at the headlines that Americans were subjected to. We'll show it up on the wall right now. So we have CNN, that the U.S. economy contracts again, fueling recession fears. WAPO, U.S. economy shrinks again in second quarter, reviving recession fears. All of these are not to the final point yet. They all are sort of holding out this hope, amplifying the White House's continued gaslighting.
It is gaslighting, but it's also interesting because if you read between the lines and sort of abstract what the president is saying, he's admitting that we are already in not only a recession, but a stagflationary period, to Jackie's point, because he's saying, yes, it's natural for the economy to slow down. Well, it's not natural. It's not necessarily what you want. But when you have massive amounts of just uncontrolled spending from the federal government and a Fed that has kept rates unnecessarily low for so long. You compound that with supply chain issues, which are very much real. You know, look at how much China supplies to the United States, and they are still very much locked down. So, you know, and there are elements that people didn't see coming, but the president is acknowledging that stagflation is here. It is real. He truly is Jimmy Carter. And by that, I mean he is a one-term president. And yes, if you can't spend money, if you can't afford things, if you lay awake at night worrying about how you're going to provide for your family, then you are already in a recession. And an administration that is being so offensive as to tell you that, you know, things are great, it's just a little warm when your house is on fire, there's nothing more offensive, and voters are going to act on that.
And at a minimum right now, polls show that over 65% of Americans feel that way. They worry about their paychecks stretching to cover costs each month. So as we talk about the onslaught that Americans feel right now of those rising inflation and costs, the decreased value of their finances, the scarcity on the shelves, Leslie, let's talk about how the media has portrayed this. Let's take a watch.
How do you change the way people think? Because we are in an economic recovery.
But is the economy already on a collision course for a recession? It depends on who you ask.
A lot of people think that, oh, if you have 2 consecutive quarters of GDP declines, that in and of itself is a recession. No, that's not the definition.
But if you're Mary Smith walking down the street with your kids going to work, does it matter what they label it? Does it affect them?
No.
So Americans feel abandoned by the president and this administration that refuses to acknowledge their pain, and also by the media who refuses to cover it accurately.
I don't think that they're refusing to acknowledge the pain. And I think the labeling, I think they're right on. It doesn't matter what you call it, it's what the voter feels. And that's not Democrat or Republican, that's just Americans, right? There are good news, points when you have the gas prices, falling for over 40 days, unemployment still a little low. You have a strong jobs report. Retail sector's been off both June and July. Those are all pluses, which is why some economists hesitate, whether you are Jane Fraser, the head of Citicorp, the CEO of Citicorp, whether you are one of the U.S. economists that say, look, I think because some of the growth, it's premature and a bit pessimistic to say that we are in, or definitely it's a definitive recession coming. But then there are those that would say, well, Merriam-Webster defines it as, I'm looking for the definition from economists, but voters are not looking for any kind of a definition. I think most voters would say they couldn't define a recession or tell anybody how it affects them. They just know what they're feeling right now, and that's not positive economically.
Can I ask you a quick follow-up? As a Democrat, how does one that supports this administration justify their continued spending, their continued hemorrhaging of our money that is increasing all of this pain and suffering? How is that defensible?
First of all, $1.9 trillion was responsible for less than 2% of our inflation. And when you look at world factors, we have a global problem with inflation, right? And we certainly know that, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, we know that the pandemic, we know the supply chain issues, all of that have contributed to this. But right now, look, Joe Manchin is on board with legislation we're going to hear about shortly. And when Joe Manchin's on board with something, I think Republicans would be on board. Because even though he's a fellow Democrat, I think his cape is a bit purple more than it is blue.
Do you have a quick follow-up you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily buy that, but you are right about Joe Manchin, and that's why Charlemagne the God calls him President Joe Manchin, because he is the most powerful person in Washington, and he's also the only person who's really in tune with his constituents. And he knows they're hurting. He knows Americans want to be energy independent, and he's not paying them lip service and telling them it's raining when really...
Can I say one quick thing about the labor market as well? I know that's something that the Democrats are hanging their hat on right now. The numbers appear to be strong. What I'm concerned about is as this slowness starts to take hold within the economy, we're going to see more and more companies start to lay people off. That's only going to add to the pressure of the American people. And then you talk about sort of more stimulus coming back through the economy. The problem right now is that every person that's looking for a job, there are 2 jobs that they could fill. People didn't go back to work the way they should have in earnest. And you have a lot of people sitting home as well. So I think the combination of those 2 things could be very problematic.
And Jerome Powell said the labor market is unsustainably hot. That was his term.
Yep.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.